TESOL Pop, Season 8, Episode 7. Hello and welcome to TESOL Pop, the mini podcast for busy teachers. My name is Laura and joining me today to talk about debunking myths in dyslexia and language learning is Ania Karwowska. Anna will be talking about 3 common myths in dyslexia, from dyslexic-friendly fonts to colour overlays to particular methods that we could use. For each one, she's going to walk through why these are a myth and what we should be doing instead to support our dyslexic students. Now, before we go into today's interview, let me tell you about some of the events that are happening at TESOL Pop so you don't miss out. This week on the 28th of February, I'm hosting a free workshop with Ellie Publishing Group on podcasting. So if you would like to use podcast media with your teenage or adult students, then you can sign up for this free workshop by going to the TESOL Pop website, as well as seeing all the other events we have scheduled for this upcoming conference season. What's more, if you are interested in recording your own podcast, then spaces for my podcast Pathfinder are still available, but enrolment is closing soon. Again, to find out more about this program, go to the website or click on the show notes. Now let's jump to my conversation with Anna, where I started by asking her what inspired her to start researching dyslexia and language learning.
First time was, my goodness, 20 years ago when I walked into a classroom, and that was a very specific school because it was called an experimental school in Warsaw. So we had students in high school, high achieving students who were supposed to go to university and do great things. And we had that class. It was called a vocational experimental class. The kids were supposed to be waiters and cooks. And one teacher told me, well, we're not going to do much with them. And I said, you know what? That's interesting. Challenge accepted. So it turned out that the kids were dyslexic or ADHD. We worked for a year. They all passed FCE. They were brilliant. They really are having careers. Some went to university. They went to another school to get the matriculation exam, went to university. The kids were really amazing. And that taught me that you can do it. You just have to know how to do it. And then my son was born. And actually, I moved to Canada and I was on a quest for him to have decent education. Then I started working with other parents. And it dawned on me that, well, those kids not only fall through the cracks, but they are expected not to learn. So that's how it started.
So that's why I'm so glad that we're recording this episode today, to kind of create more space for these conversations to be having, and for teachers to feel empowered to do research and to lean into what may seem like a field that's outside of their expertise. Is something we can learn. There's things we can learn. And I think let's start with obviously dispelling the common myths. So we have 3 myths today. Are you ready for the first one to knock it out of the park? Okay. So myth number 1, there are particular fonts that are more accessible. For example, fonts that are easier for students with dyslexia to read.
That's very interesting you should say that, because I have had a discussion about fonts only yesterday, and the discussion was very heated. So there is a lot of research, like Professor Shanahan from University of Chicago, the Dr. Gab from Gab Lab, University of Harvard, just to name a few. They have been talking that dyslexic fonts do not work, right? Right, because dyslexia is not a vision issue. And I think I know that teachers have best interests at heart, and definitely they have so much to cater to, and so many students with diverse needs. So I understand it's really difficult to sift through every piece of research. But just to reiterate, dyslexic fonts do not work. If someone finds them useful, that's fantastic. I say kudos to you. Beautiful. But we call it individual experience. So it is a lived experience, and we can say that's important, that's valid, but it's only valid for the person who has that experience. We cannot quantify it because the research says clearly dyslexic fonts do not work. So you have to teach the student to read. You have to teach them the patterns. You have to teach them how the language works. You have to teach them how to blend phonemes into a syllable, how to create a word. What is an onset? What is a rhyme? And you can come up with all the fonts in the world, simplify them, create your own font, I don't know. But it will not teach your students to read. And I think the worst thing is that if students fail, and they will blame themselves. So the self-esteem is already low, and it will get lower just because they think what's wrong with me? I mean, if that font is not helping, so there has to be something fundamentally wrong with me. They will not say, okay, this doesn't work. They say, I do not work. It's that I'm to blame.
Like with any of these things we're talking about today, it can have a huge impact on a student's self-esteem, and teachers too, if they're trying all these things thinking that they work because there's so much publicity about them. It can also be very disheartening for the teacher too, feeling like they're not good enough or that there's something that they're missing. But this is really a big one to address first. And just to clarify, because I think there is some overlap between visibility and what's accessible on a visible level. Like I wear glasses. I need to read a certain size font. Some fonts are easier for me to read just because. That's due to my eyesight, not due to dyslexia, right? That's what we're saying here.
Yeah, I'm not dyslexic. When I read on my e-reader, I often use larger fonts, because especially when I'm tired and I spend hours writing by the computer or writing, I get tired. So
Me too, yeah.
I will space out text when I'm writing just because I'm tired and I get fatigued, or I use bigger fonts. But that's not so that I'm a better reader. It's just because of my eyesight, that especially in this time of year, when it's getting darker sooner, it's getting worse.
Absolutely. I think this is the key thing, isn't it? Eyesight, access, design, clarity of the design, and then dyslexia, separate things, not so much as interlocking. That's fantastic. That's our first one. So there's no such thing as a dyslexic-friendly font. We've got 2 more to go that are perhaps going to really surprise our listeners. So let's move on to the second one. Myth 2, color overlays that we can place over our computer screens or printed text even can make it easier for us to read text, or can make it easier for dyslexic students to read text. Is that true?
No. I probably should have said yes. No. Dyslexia, fundamentally, dyslexia is neurobiological in origin. It's in your brain. It doesn't have anything to do with your eyes. I say the eyes are like the doors that open. But if you look at the eyeball, all the nerves are connected with our brain. We read with our brain. We do not read. I know it sounds probably weird for some people, but we do not read with our eyes. So it doesn't work. And again, we have to teach the students to read. And for teachers, do not waste their precious time, because teachers are given, so fundamentally, they will do everything to help the students. And then they are frustrated because it's not working. And that's understandable. The student is frustrated because it's not working. And the whole idea of a classroom, is shattered because the teacher is upset. It's but it's not working. I've tried the fonts, I've tried the overlays. The student is what's wrong with me? The teacher says, what's wrong with me? They both at the same point when they start doubting themselves because it's not working.
So with this color overlays, because I read things about color contrasts, and I think this is similar to the fonts that we just discussed as well, about design principles, about font sizes, spacing, and the contrast between the color of the font and the background. Is that also the same, or is that something different?
It's the vision issue. So it is it's not connected to dyslexia. There was even a research of flickering colors. It has been published, I think, last year, that says that no, it's not working. Again, it's not a dyslexia remedy. I think it's something that it's like a thing from the past where we didn't have a lot of research. The neuroscience wasn't as prominent. We couldn't test, we couldn't see, we couldn't assess how things are going. So we were trying, try and error, and that's normal. However, we are at a different, let's say, step in our history, in our development. So no, they are not working.
Again, this is a vision issue. And just, obviously, it's nice to have these things like color contrast and spacing, because it makes things more easy to read, particularly if you're on a small device like a phone. That's just good design, isn't it? But not dyslexic friendly. People think they're being dyslexic friendly, but it's not the same.
Yeah, it's not dyslexic friendly. It's a good design. So again, if someone likes it, absolutely. But I wouldn't use it as a remedy or as a tool to help your dyslexic student.
So finally, we've got one more myth, and that's related to teaching methods. So myth number 3, there's a specific teaching method that's better than the rest. I'm not going to name any, but let's just hypothetically think of specific methods that are out there that are supposedly really good at helping dyslexic students.
So there are methods that I wouldn't be using. So first of all, I would just say, when you think of dyslexia, think how the language works. Every language is like a structure. So let's say there are languages that are syllable based. There are languages that are more for phonemic, like English. So focus on the language. Like I say, structural approach to language. You think of SLPs. Literally, there is an overlap. So approach a language like a structure. I'd say, for example, reading. There is a concept, we call it a Scarborough rule, that there are many skills that come into skilled reading. So you have decoding and coding, that's like the base. And then we have morphology, syntax, grammar, and on the top we have critical thinking, which is cherry on top. So this is working. If anyone tells you that you can create mental images in your head, that reading is a whole reading process, it's not. We literally reading we map phoneme and grapheme. That's how the reading works. So avoid any method that tells you that we read words as a whole. Avoid any method that teaches you that you can create mental images or that tells you that dyslexia is a vision issue. I would say just this, and you'll be golden. Focus on the language, on a structured approach to language and how the brain processes language. And then you will know where to start.
Do you have any tips for teachers who are listening in terms of like how they can move forward today, having learned what they've learned and wanting to help their students? They've probably identified a few students who may be dyslexic in their classes, and they're wondering, well, what should I do? How can I best help them?
Well, I would say, for starters, ask them to write. If you have students who are writing, ask them to give you a raw piece of text, 4 or 5 sentences. Do not ask them to correct it or cross it out. Write it, give it to me, forget about it. Don't get upset. It's not about marking. Then you will see what mistakes are they making. Are they making phonological mistakes? For example, some students make the mistake when they write voiced as voiceless sounds and vice versa, or they struggle with Tion, right? They, for example, write it as Cion. So we'll see whether it's phonological. So there are certain sounds that they cannot hear, that they cannot process phonologically. So there is phonological awareness and phonemic awareness you have to work on. Or there are some morphological mistakes because they don't understand how it works. And then I would just, if I were in the classroom, I would just start with addressing those. So if you have to go back to the basics, ask your student to map phonemes and graphemes, have 1-minute drills with segmenting, deletion, final, initial, syllable, blending drills, have a minute or two, and then say, okay, this method didn't work. That's okay, that's fine. We just move on. We do this without any further explanation. I just go back to the basics. I know that especially parents don't like it because they want to rush through and have the results. And I say, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And when you go back to the basics, it's the same with grammar. Like even for English teachers, before you start talking about present simple, present continuous, past perfect continuous, conditional clauses, and passive voice, and your student just looks at you like this and says, okay, I have no idea what you're talking about. Go back to subject, verb, object, explain how the simplest structure, how it works, and then expand it, and only then introduce the first tense. Because even the simplest tense, like present simple, it takes so much to process. I would say in terms of grammar, multisensory grammar is fantastic for dyslexic students. I use it a lot and I'm a huge fan, really. So I would say start with this and don't get upset. You're not gonna do it within a day, and it's okay. It's like driving a car, riding a bike. It takes time, so give yourself space and grace as well. Be good to yourself. You're doing well. You want to spark a change. It's fantastic. One step at a time, and it's going to be just better and better.
I think that's wonderful advice to end on, starting with a needs analysis, trying things, reflecting, and don't worry too much if it doesn't work. There's other options and you can work with your student to find what works for them.
Exactly.
It's been lovely talking to you, Anna. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
To find out more about Anna's work, then you can go to her website, polcalanguages.carter.com, or you can connect with her on LinkedIn. And both of those links are in the show notes, so you can access those easily. Finally, you can support the work we do at TESOL Pop by leaving a rating review wherever you listen to the podcast, by sharing today's episode with your community, or by even buying us a coffee at ko-fi.com/TESOL Pop.